Bonjiva Corja. Hello, everybody. Eimear Burke here. Welcome to another Fireside Chat. And this is Fireside Chat 171, where I'm in conversation with a member of the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids. And as is customary, I begin with a prayer for peace. Gamara Shiakon na fud na crinne, Gamara Shiakon in our Jaili agus in our Jirha. Gunari Lin Lenakij Garmaka, Gamich Buikus Jeev, Je Chivdaka, Ispirit Chivdaka. May peace prevail on earth. May peace prevail in our homes and in our countries. May our missions be accomplished. We thank you, guardian spirits and guardian deities, for peace. As the fever of day calms towards twilight, may all that is strained in us come to ease. We pray for all who suffered violence today. May an unexpected serenity surprise them. For those who risk their lives each day for peace, may their hearts glimpse providence at the heart of history. That those who make riches from violence and war might hear in their dreams the cries of the lost. That we might see through our fear of each other a new vision to heal our fatal attraction to aggression. And that those who enjoy the privilege of peace might not forget their tormented brothers and sisters. That the wolf might lie down with the lamb, that our swords be beaten into ploughshares, and no hurt or harm be done anywhere along the Holy Mountain, with thanks to John O'Donoghue. So let me see where you're all from. So we've got Happy New Moon from Nimi. Thank you. Sunny Gisborne, New Zealand. I'm impressed that you're up so early. Hello from Ulster. Hi Liz from Arapaho Cheyenne, Eastern Shoshone. Lovely. South Wales. Beautiful. Sunny Longford. You're very, very lucky. Sunny Pacific Ocean Beach, Wyoming, Belgium. Just lovely to see you all. Greetings from Northamptonshire. It's dry and sunny. Actually, it wasn't so bad today. I've been out for a walk, actually, and it was dry. North London. So Ruth from Wexford, lovely. Netherlands. Banff in, Aberdeenshire. Warwickshire. Stavanger. Okay, I don't know where that is. Alton, Illinois. Lovely. Massachusetts. Beautiful. So you're all welcome. And there's Denmark and there's Poland. Wow, great. Cloudy, Maryland. Okay. So you're all, and then we've got Oxfordshire, Boston. Beautiful. The Phoebe and the ancestral lands of the Nipmuc, Massachusetts, and Wampanoag peoples. Oh God, I hope I didn't mispronounce that too badly. AK Boston, Maine, West Yorkshire, deepest, darkest Elmer's End, hi Ricky, and New South Wales. Anyway, East Tennessee. Oh my God, there's people flying in now. Anyway, we're going to the UK today, and I'd like to introduce my guest this evening, or this morning, or this afternoon, if you're watching this, or even a recording of this, is Viv. Right, Viv, you're so welcome.
Thank you.
This chat.
Hi,
so, tell our guests, where our viewers, where you're where you are.
Okay, well, I'm have a cottage in a village probably about 5 miles away from the Somerset Wiltshire border. It's probably about 40 minutes away from Stonehenge and 40 minutes away from Avebury, so it's sort of on the edge of Salisbury Plain. So lovely countryside and lovely walking countryside as well.
Oh, beautiful. So for those, I mean, I've been to Avebury and I've been to Stonehenge, and obviously I've been to Somerset. So can you just, for those who haven't, can you just describe your landscape as you see it, as you know it?
Okay. Well, the countryside has got quite a lot of nice villages scattered across it, as well as some market towns. And Salisbury Plain itself, parts of it villages sort of within it, and parts of it are quite wild and windswept, and quite a large part of it is looked after by the army, and they do training sessions on there. There's also what they call a lost village on there called Eimear, which I think in the middle of the war, the villagers were given about a month's notice that this was going to be used as a training ground. And it was said that they were always promised that when the war was over, they would be allowed back to their village. But unfortunately, that never happened. So that's quite sad, really. And it's open about 3 or 4 times a year so that people can go and visit their loved ones' graves and walk around the village itself. Yeah, it's quite sad.
Absolutely. So the army is still using it, that area
Yes.
then?
Yes.
Wow. Just reminds me when a certain somebody wants to, 2 proposals about Gaza. Just move out and we'll build it up for you and you can come back in. It's like,
Yes. Yeah.
Hannah Semple has a question. Is Imber Church where they have a Christmas service?
They do, yes. Yeah, St Giles' Church, I think it is. Yeah, so they do have a service there. And I think they also have a service there on the, is it called a Patronal Festival, whichever saint it is that the church is named after. I think they have a festival on the, a service on the festival day of that saint.
Well, it's great that they actually get access at times,
Yes.
Well done to that they still manage to do that and to visit their ancestors and the graves and things like that. It's better than nothing. Still not good enough, but anyway, but that's a long time ago now.
Well,
all those people who left are probably long gone.
And a lot of the buildings now have been so damaged, I think, and bombed. Whether that was more careless, I don't know. But of course, now the excuse is, oh, well, nobody could come back and live here anyway because most of the buildings are destroyed. So there we are.
Mm-hmm. So when you mentioned Stonehenge and you mentioned Avebury, which is your favourite?
I think possibly Avebury. In a way, I guess it's more accessible. I don't know how you feel about it, but I mean, years ago, Stonehenge, I think when I was about 12 or 13, I asked my parents if I could go there at sunrise for the solstice. And in those days, you were allowed to go right inside the stones. And Mum and Dad took me along with a school friend, and it was magical. And it was they said it was the first sunrise in something like about 7 or 8 years where it had actually been really clear enough to see it. So that was magical, really, to be able to be there on that occasion. It was great.
That is so beautiful, beautiful.
Yes.
Because it's interesting. I met this woman. She lives in Ireland now, but she said that they used to go have picnics at Stonehenge. It was like her playground.
Yes.
When I've been there a few times, I haven't been in a number of years, but we were able to touch the stones, and now you can't. And yet, on 2 days of the year, it's open to everybody, where 20,000 people can do it. And it's less policed. But it's interesting that Gabriella says, I could sit there like a potato forever in the centre of the stones. Interesting, they're talking about St. Giles. Ricky says, St. Giles is the patron saint of the church in Imber, Wiltshire. The church is named after him. And then Pat Booker says St. Giles, because she's an expert on saints, aren't you, Pat? St. Giles is the patron saint of lepers and beggars. And there was a St. Giles church right behind her college. That's in Oxford.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Lovely. So, because I've asked people, I'm often with Obod, which do they prefer? And so many people say they prefer Avebury. I don't know why. It's interesting. And because maybe it's so accessible. And what's really interesting, how Avebury has retained its magic, even though there's a village in the middle of it.
Yes.
And you would think, oh, no, you have destroyed it, blah, blah, blah. And yet the power of those stones and the energy around it is just amazing that it hasn't.
Yes. We did a dowsing course once with a lady. I think her name's Maria Wheatley. I think she's quite well known, apparently, in dowsing circles. And we were dowsing the sort of energy lines and the ley lines through the stones. And that was something that was very interesting to do, very powerful. You could really get that sense of energy, and the rods would really move quite a lot when we did that. It was great.
Wow. And Pat says Avebury every time because you can find space to be alone with the stone. Stonehenge is so busy. That is true. And I've only been to Stonehenge, actually. Have I been? Once my husband and the kids, and that was as a tour, and you couldn't go near the stones. And then I've been for ceremonies, which is lovely. But it's usually, when it's Obod, it's just 100 people as opposed to the big numbers. But yes, there is that sense of space in Avebury.
It's lovely. Yes, we sort of reminded me when you were saying about saints, and made me think of goddesses and this kind of thing. And whilst I've been doing the Obod course, I sort of I felt quite a an affinity, I think, to Bridget. I don't know why,
Mhm.
really, but I always, right from the beginning, felt that. And it reminded me, talking about the cottage in the village, which we've got, which is, I think, about 1760, it was built. And it took a long time to find a property in the village. It took us a long while. And so I decided I was going to get a piece of wood and write a prayer to Bridget in the Ogham script, which I did, sort of asking for her help in finding a house in the village. So I thought, well, what can I do to, well, ground this or cement it? So I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll bury it in the garden, to sort of, I don't know, bring the energy down, bring it in, hope that it would happen. And so I did that, was fine. And then a couple of nights later, I had this dream, and I dreamt I was walking through the street, the main high street of the village, and this older lady was walking towards me, and she said, "You're looking for a house, aren't you, in the village?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "You are going to find one soon." So I was, okay. And she said, "There's going to be a connection to horses." And I thought, oh, that's a bit strange, but okay, that's fine. Anyway, I know, it's really odd. About 2 weeks later, this property came up on Rightmove, this cottage in the village, and we thought, oh, this looks really nice, go to look at it. So went to have a look at it, and the really strange thing was that probably in the mid 1800s, apparently there'd been a forge next to it. And I thought, that's the connection with
Bridget.
horses. Yes, I'm Bridget, the goddess of smithcraft. And when we went to look in the downstairs, went through the kitchen into the utility room. And when we went into the downstairs toilet, on the wall was this plaque with 2 swans on. And I thought, the swans are connected, aren't they, with Bridget? I just thought, this is just so magical. It's really amazing.
And it's interesting, there is a connection with St. Giles. Pat Booker, can you look at this? Because she's watching. Did St. Giles give Bridget a bell, or did Bridget give St. Giles a bell? Because she spent time in Glastonbury, and there's an image of her in Glastonbury, and I think she left her bell behind. There's certain things. So there's a connection between Bridget and Glastonbury as well. And I have a feeling it's something to do with St. Giles as well. Just interesting, these little these connections. So, and then just again, Avery resonates with a lot of people. Ricky, Children of the Stones, that series, I've never seen it. That series, Children of the Stones, have you seen it?
I have. I can't remember if it was Channel 4, Channel 4 IT, something like that. I think I watched it years ago. I don't know if it was in the 70s or 80s. I can't remember now, but yes. I think it was quite something a little bit sort of, well, probably not for an adult, but for a child, a bit sort of spooky, I think. But
yes, I mean, I haven't watched it, but it had a little bit of, I
I
don't know,
think it's still
something about it.
available, possibly on YouTube or something like that. I did watch it on something. I can't remember, some catch-up thing. So I think you can still watch it.
It's mentioned a few times on these chats, and I keep saying I must go and watch it. I keep forgetting. So now another reminder.
Yeah.
So Nimi says, the last time we were at Avebury, there was a kestrel hovering above the ditch. We sat and watched it for ages. It completely ignored the few walkers on the dogs, and it was almost outside of time. Yeah, just beautiful, beautiful, wonderful. So, what your background? You mentioned you were you come from a Methodist background. So, what was it like growing up as a Methodist, and how did you find your way? Actually, St. Gilda's for St. Bridget's Bell. Sorry about that. Anyway, how did you find your way? From that being a Methodist to being a Druid.
Well, I think my ancestors, my great grandparents, my grandparents were Methodists, and so was my mother. But then by the time I came along, I think they'd started going more to an Anglican church, which I followed. And I think it was a thing I'd always felt I wanted some sort of spiritual quality in my life. I didn't really know what it was. And so I started going to church, but I quite enjoyed it, but it didn't really feel completely right, I suppose, for me. And I remember probably when I was about 7 or 8, we lived up in the Peak District then in Derbyshire. And that's somewhere funnily enough, that we visited a couple of weeks ago, because I've been doing quite a lot of research on ancestry into my ancestors, and we were able to sort of go and see the roads that they lived on and this sort of thing, which was lovely. It was a lovely thing to do. So I lose my train of thought here. Yeah, so I was coming home, I think, with my parents across the countryside in the Peak District, which, again, like Stonehenge, is quite wild countryside. And I just remembered having this experience of, it was almost like a feeling of being connected to that countryside, and almost like a feeling somehow of everything being one. That's the only way I can nature, people, everything, just this thing. It was quite a important sort of feeling, I think, for me, quite a big thing, really. And so anyway, time went on, and then I eventually started to follow the Buddhist path. That was something that I think quite appealed to me. And there again, it was something which I enjoyed, but didn't exactly quite feel right. And I'd always had this interest, even from, I suppose, being in my early teens, in druidry, or feeling that connection with nature, because I've always loved animals and I've always loved nature. Druidry was something that appealed to me, and I think that's why probably I'd said to Mum and Dad I wanted to go to Stonehenge that morning to see the sunrise. And when I got made redundant from work in about 2018, I think, I don't know, it just seemed the right time somehow. I thought, oh, this is an opportunity perhaps to do something like this. So I can't remember exactly how I found Obod. I know you often ask me this, but I think I must have Googled it or something. I don't know. And I sent off for the introductory course. And I know everybody really says, oh, I just felt I'd come home. But that's just what it felt like, I think, really. And I ended up going to something at Avebury. They had a ceremony there for the Wheel of the Year, which I enjoyed. It was quite magical because it was in February. It was really quite deep snow. There was only about 8 people, I think, who turned up to it. But it was wonderful. The snow added to the magic, I think. It was really sort of nice. And I think it just felt right, really. Sort of things that I've gone to where I've met other druids, although they're a very diverse range of people, they're just always such lovely people, I think. They're so welcoming, and it's just a pleasure, really, to be at these group meetings. It does just feel like you've come home. That's the only way I can describe it, really.
Well, Lloyd Hale says you didn't find Obod, it found you.
Yes, Lloyd, that's very true.
Yeah, I don't know how I, you know what, I don't know how I did. I know why I did, but how did I get in touch with Obod? Oh, yeah, no, it was Cassandra Easton's book. She mentioned at the back of the book, her book, The Modern Day Druidess, and she recommended and said she was a good course because she had done it. So I did and went online, and again, the same thing. Just knowing it was the right thing. And it's just so lovely when you have that sense of, this is right.
Yes.
It's right for me. Just beautiful. Yeah. So, because we met just at the winter gathering, and that was your first ever gathering.
Yes.
So what was it like? What was it like for you being a newcomer to a gathering?
I really enjoyed it. I think I know I mentioned to you, I liked what you did about making all the newbies stand up so that you could say to other people, if you see any of these people on their own, go and talk to them, which was lovely. I thought really it made everybody feel very welcome. And I'd stayed at the what's it called? Mine's gone blank. Not the Holiday Inn, but the place at Glastonbury on the road where you go to Street Premier Inn. That's it, yeah. And while we were having breakfast at the Premier Inn, I'd seen somebody in the distance. I thought I'd seen him on the YouTube, but never actually met him. I thought, oh, that looks a bit like Adrian. And so I thought I wanted to go up and speak to him, and my friend that I was with said, well, go and say hello. And I thought, oh no, if this random woman comes up and interrupts his breakfast, he's not going to be very happy. And then when we were in the hall, I actually saw him. So I said, oh, I am going to go up and say hello to him. And he said, oh, it's funny because he said, I saw you looking at me and I kept looking at you. And his partner had said, I'm sure she's a nobody. Go and speak to her. And he was the same. He said, oh, no, I can't do that. So we had a long chat with him and that was very nice.
That's
and
really
we enjoyed all the chats. They were very different, weren't they? I think one of them was almost quite scholarly, and then I can't remember her name, but the Welsh lady, she was hysterical.
Mara Starling, wasn't she lovely?
So funny. That was really good. And it was lovely to go to the ceremony as well, where, as you say, we could see the tour and whatever in the distance. So, you know, having seen ceremonies again on things like YouTube, to actually be a part of it, it was really lovely. It was very
absolutely, nice, yeah. You know, it was another gathering. And you came up to me. You know, that's why we talked. Yeah. So it was beautiful. I mean, it's important for us that people feel welcome and to do what we can, because it's hard. It's quite intimidating, because I remember the first few times I went to a summer gathering, I just found it difficult because I'm nobody believes this, but I'm actually naturally shy. And if I'm the host, it's fine. I can manage all of that because I have a job. But when I'm a guest or a newcomer, I find that hard. So, you were once a musician, weren't you?
I was, yes. Well, I suppose I had a fairly classical beginning because I did A-level music at school, and I used to play the trumpet in the county youth orchestra. Yes, and also I used to play the recorder in a medieval music ensemble, so that was quite a nice thing to do. But also, I think because when you do A-level music, you have to do a certain standard of your sort of grade exams, practical things you have to do up to, I think it's grade 6 or something like that for A-level. So although I enjoyed playing music, and I used to play in silver band as well, I suppose it got to the stage where it almost became like I wouldn't say a chore, perhaps that's too strong a word, but because you knew you had to practice every day, and it took the enjoyment a little bit, I think, kind of out of it. So once I'd finished my A-level music, I had a little bit of a break, and I'd always quite wanted to play the violin. I think that was something I was quite interested in. So I found a violin teacher, and who in fact was Irish. She was from Donegal. She was a lovely lady. Started having lessons, and then at one time I was going out with somebody who played in a folk rock band, and so I joined that band, and that was quite a different experience because you didn't have music to read, which obviously I'd been used to. You had to do everything by ear, so it was something very different. And we used to play at Cayley's in various places, which was lovely. I really enjoyed that. And it was quite good because you obviously had to pick the tunes up as you were going, I suppose, really, rather than just sitting there and having the music there in front of you. We went to some really lovely places. We went to this beautiful old manor house once, and we played in the barn outside. And I forget the guy I was going out with. He was what I suppose you describe a bit of a card. He was a bit of a mad Welsh drummer, and I can remember this very posh lady. It was sort of one of these matching set of Labradors and Green Wellies type of a place. You know, she was very, very posh. And she came around, I'll never forget, with these raffle tickets. And he said something to her about how much is a raffle ticket. I forget, she said to him, it's, say, 50p for a strip. Okay. And then he looked at her and he said, if it's 50p for a strip, what would you do for a £5? And I was mortified. I thought, God, she's going to be, you know, think how terrible, what a thing to say. But actually, she loved it. She just roared with laughter. She wasn't in the least bit offended. And it was really good. And then we had one of the melodeon players. He used to take snuff, I think, and if he wanted to wind people up, he used to tell them it was cocaine. So they were, you know, cases. That's all I can say. But it was great fun. It was really nice to play, and people really enjoyed the dances. We had our own caller, so he used to help people learn the dances. And it was something very different, but it was something very enjoyable. It was really good.
So you were playing the violin in a folk rock band, and then you were also in a Cayley band. I mean, you've had such
Well, the
Is
folk
that
rock band we used to play at Cayley's, although they played
okay.
quite, because we had one of the guys used to play bass guitar. So rather than it made it quite a rock sort of sound, I suppose, but it was Cayley
As
music
a
which they
Gaelic?
were playing. Yes.
Wow. Okay,
Yeah, it
okay.
was really good. They were called Pig's Ear, which
Oh.
bit of strange, I know, strange name, but yeah, it was great.
Were you familiar with Horselips, the Irish band? They were a folk rock
No,
band.
I haven't
Oh, they were.
heard of
Look them
it.
up. They were brilliant.
Oh,
Absolutely
will do.
brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the melodeon is an ancient. I don't know how old. Hannah asked, "Is it an ancient instrument?" It's an old one. I mean, it comes from
Yes,
many
I don't think it's necessarily ancient. It's sort of like an accordion, that type of thing, like a
a
squeeze
baby
box,
one.
I
Yeah,
think.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. But it's. I don't know how old it is, but it comes. It's there in many traditions, isn't it? Or
Yes, so I
variations
think
of them.
so.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And the fact that we had the drums there, the drummer, he'd played in a blues band before and done some sort of rock thing. So there's quite a rock kind of beat to it, I suppose. So, and
Wow.
I think at that time it was like Steel I Span and these other bands that were around. It became quite a thing, didn't it? This folk rock music. So it was a popular time for it, I think.
I'm just because I know say Cayley music in Ireland would not be folk rock, and I'm really interested. It strikes me it's like Obod, which has all this melting pot of different worldviews coming in together, and different nationalities and different languages coming together in an order, and then you come with all these influences to play
Yes.
your music in a Cayley. It's like wow, and it's amazing to be able to integrate these and just have all the different characteristics
Mm.
of the various genre of music in one place to facilitate Ceilidh dancing. It's
Yes.
impressive.
Yeah.
And
No,
do
it's
you play any
brilliant.
music now?
Um, Not very often. I've got an electric keyboard, and I sometimes sort of do things like that. But I don't get on so well with the violin because I've had a bit of an accident with that finger. I
Okay.
It got hit with a tub of Bertolli Light, which I thought was a bit ironic because it was very heavy, and it put my finger, it dislocated the finger. And as I looked at it, I thought, oh, has something gone wrong with my eyesight or something? It was just like this. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And
Wow.
it was just instinctive, really. I didn't know what to do, and I just managed somehow to put it back in myself. I mean, I don't know how I did it really, but I just
Wow.
managed to line everything up and do it. And I can remember where I worked for a local paper, and I worked with a youngish guy who was only about in his 20s.
Hmm.
And he said something about my finger, and I said, yes, I put it back in, myself. And he said, God, you must be hardcore, which made me laugh because it was painful, I must say, to do it.
Yes.
But when I went to have it checked, I went to the hospital to have it checked, and she looked at it. She said, you're the only person I've ever met who's managed to line up she said, usually we have to re-break them, but she said, you've lined up all the bones, the tendons, yes, I know, everything. And then she said to me, would you like a job? I mean, how I did it, as I say, I've no idea. But somehow I just managed to get it all back into place again. But it's
Because
left it.
often it's sorry, I've lost you there.
Oh, right. Yes, it's just sort of left it bent. So I think I'm not so good now. If I was trying to play the
Yeah.
violin, I think I would struggle with it.
So you didn't take the job to be a bone setter, no?
I didn't take the job to be a bone setter, no. Would have been an interesting job, I think, but I don't know if I'm quite that talented in bone setting, but anyway.
So what did you do for a living? How do you still do?
Well, for 2.5 years, I worked for the NHS, just sort of more in an admin type setting. And my mother at that time worked part-time for the local daily paper. And I think in those days, it makes it sound like it was 100 years ago, but probably sort of in the 70s. There was still quite a few, I suppose, what I'd call characters who worked in newspapers, especially in local newspapers. And she'd, come home and sort of regale us with these stories of all these things that had happened, and I thought, oh, that sounds really fun. And anyway, then a job came up on the local weekly newspaper, and I thought, well, I'm going to apply for that. I think it could be something, a little bit different. So I applied for it and managed to get it. But it was an interesting place because it was almost like watching an Agatha Christie film, but without the murders. It was really like sort of old fashioned. It was like something in the 1940s. And they had these old typewriters with the round keys, that sort of age, really old. And I can remember the first thing when I one of the first things I had to do, talking of snuff, was to go out into the town to the tobacconist and get snuff for the works manager. That was my first job. And I can also remember I opened the desk drawer, and in the desk drawer was a bottle of gin and a bottle opener. And I thought, well, this is obviously going to be quite an interesting place to work where there's sort of alcohol in there. But it changed greatly in the years that I was there. I wouldn't say I loved the job all the time, but I think what kept me there was I very much liked the group of people that I worked with. And when I first went to work there, it was a family firm owned by the Lansdowne family. And it was very much a family atmosphere. It wasn't so cutthroat as newspapers can be these days. Everybody chipped in and sort of helped each other. And it was just a nice place to work, I suppose, really. But over the years, there were great changes. It was bought out by a larger company. And obviously, the production process on newspapers, when I went there, it was all the old hot metal, as it was years and years ago. And as time went on, obviously, it changed. Computers came in, as well as a paid-for title. We started having a freely delivered title. Then we started having sort of colour supplements, colour magazines. Then obviously online became a big thing, and we had to sell onto the websites and this sort of thing. So the job completely changed to how it was. And I don't think I enjoyed it so much. I think it was more fun in the old days. I think and I can remember we had years and years ago, we had a visit from the Duke of Atholl. He was the chairman of Westminster Press who bought them. And he was a lovely guy, really. There was a sort of innocence, I think, about him. He wasn't, again, like some of the managers that you would get these days. He was slightly eccentric, I think, but he would go round on these visits. He would speak to everybody because, again, in more modern times, they would bring these people around. You'd never be introduced to them. They'd just say, oh, this is the advertising, this is editorial. He'd never come and speak to you. But he would come round and speak to each person. He'd ask you what you did, how long you'd been there. Really nice. And one of the girls next to me, she was going up to Perthshire because he lived at Blair Atholl, had this very nice castle. And she was going up there to Perthshire, I think, with her husband in the summer. And he said, oh, have you been there before? No, he was talking about it. And he said, when are you going up there? So I think she said, oh, July or something. And he got out this little card and he wrote this number on it. He said, this is my phone number. When you come up, I'd like you to ring me and you must come and have tea with me, which she did. I know. And she said it was lovely. She said he was just such a lovely, gentle person. She had the most lovely time with him. And when I look back at it, I think feel it's not something I'd want to go into these days in newspapers. When I talk to my friends that used to be in the paper, I say we sound like a load of old cronies, but I kind of think we had the best of times. We were at the times where there were characters in there. It was more fun. It was just different to how it is now, I think.
So what was your job in the paper?
Sorry?
What was your job in the paper?
I worked in the advertising department.
Okay.
So it was basically what they'd call these days media sales, I suppose, sort of selling advertising space. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Gabriella says, does Viv have a podcast? Because I found myself several times thinking her voice and storytelling are perfect for that, and I'd subscribe now.
Oh, thank you, Gabriella. That's very kind. I don't at the moment, but that's something to consider. Thank you.
Because, with the podcast, you can have all the eccentrics you like on.
Yes, I know, it'd be wonderful. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. That's interesting. Beautiful. So So were you like at night time in the rock band and then during the day doing your advertising stuff?
Yes, I mean, we weren't playing sort of every weekend, I don't suppose, probably once or twice a month, something like that, I think. So it was just a fun thing to do. I mean, sometimes people said to me, however did you stay there all those years? But I think it was because the things I enjoyed doing, the things that satisfied my soul, if that doesn't sound pretentious, I suppose I did them outside of work and inside work. In a way, I suppose it was somewhere convenient to home. I liked the people that I worked with. And I suppose in a way it was the easy option, maybe. I mean, when I was deciding what I wanted to do for work, I think I either wanted to do something perhaps musical, but I didn't really want to teach. And I think I didn't consider myself talented enough really to get into an orchestra. And the only other thing, or something I considered, was becoming a music librarian. But the year that I would have been going to university, there was quite a lot of council cuts and specialist library people. This sort of thing was all, going to be cut. And I thought, do I want to do this? And the only other thing, I wanted to do something perhaps animal related. But again, it's extremely competitive to get into vet school. And realistically, I didn't think I was going to get, I don't say you've necessarily got to get straight A's in sciences, but I think you've got to get pretty good grades, really. And obviously there's the option of something like being a vet nurse. But I had a word with our local vets and he said to me, I don't know whether I'd really advise you to do that. He said, only this morning I had somebody from up in Scotland contacting me to see if we'd got vacancies. And he said a lot of vets really prefer to take somebody who's not fully qualified and train them themselves, I suppose, to be honest, because they can probably pay them less. Probably doesn't sound very kind, but it's probably a fact. So that put me off that a bit. And I think that's in a way why I kind of ended up drifting into newspapers, because it was something that sounded eccentric and fun. And yeah, so, but I'm not sorry that I did it, because a lot of the things we learned, we had lots of training, things like presentation skills and rapport building and all this tosh that you have to learn when you do sales. But it's quite good. I mean, things like presentation skills, I did a talk on because again, really just for friends and family, I practice healing for animals. And I did a talk once for the Cats Protection League, I think. And the fact that I'd done something on presentation skills, that was quite helpful to me. And in fact, I was really nervous doing it because I'd not stood up in front of anybody and done that before. And this lady came up to me and she said, oh, I bet you find this quite boring, don't you? And I thought she meant the talk was boring. And she said, oh, no, I don't mean that. But she said, you're so professional at what you do. You've obviously done it so many times. And I had to say, no, actually, this is the first time I've ever done it. I'm really nervous. But I think if I hadn't had that training, I would have struggled with doing something like putting a talk together and putting it across. So I never regret doing that job. It might not have been my dream job, but I met some lovely people who I still keep in touch with, and I learned some good skills. So, yeah.
And you now, I'm just interested. You said animal healing. Just where did that? So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I practice Reiki for animals, which is if people are not familiar with Reiki, it's a sort of form of hands-on healing. I think it's very gentle and doesn't involve any form of manipulation or anything like that. And it's a way really to help kickstart the animal's self-healing mechanism. That's how I would describe it, I suppose. I mean, it's something when you learn to practice healing, they talk to you about what is rather grandly called the curing healing dichotomy, which I'm sure, Eimear, you probably have had mentioned to you. But I think possibly we tend to think of curing and healing as being the same thing, and actually sometimes they're not. Sometimes symptoms and things will be cured, but sometimes the animal's times come and it just kind of helps them towards a more peaceful acceptance. I think, that kind of thing. And sometimes you have to be a little bit careful how you say it, but you have to try and explain in some words to people, that it isn't always necessary to get a cure, if that's the term you want to use. But it's quite interesting, really, because I think vets are a bit more open now to it. And somebody told me the other day that actually there's a module in vet school where they teach them about healing, which was, you know, a nice thing to know. But I did some healing for a gentleman who'd got a German Shepherd. It was actually at our local vets, and the animal was quite poorly. So he said, could I come actually into the vets to do the healing? So I spoke to the vets about it, and obviously they weren't quite sure at first. But when I said, you know, there's no manipulation or anything like that, it's just hands-on. And I suppose they thought, well, as you say, sounds a bit woo-woo, but if she's not going to do
any harm, yeah,
not going to do any harm. So they showed me into this sort of back room where the dog was stretched, lying out, and he was wired up to all this stuff, and his breathing was sort of quite heavy. He was obviously quite poorly. So went over to the dog and just sort of talked to him. And I put my hands on the dog, and I'd had my hands on him for a few moments, and then I heard all this kerfuffle in the background, and I thought, oh, you know, what's going on? And like a door opening. But I thought, well, if they want me to do something, they'll come and speak to me. So anyway, finished the healing, and that was fine. And then when I'd finished, a couple of the vets came out, and they said, oh, can we just have a word with you? And I said, yes, wondering what they were going to say. And they said that was so interesting for us, because they said, we've got him monitored in here. It's all connected, and we can see what's happening. We can see his heart rate, his breathing rate, everything that's going on. And they said, we were watching the machine and all the readings, and they said suddenly the readings changed from his breathing being very heavy and his heart rate. They just all went down to normal. And they said, we thought, oh, something's gone wrong with the machine. You can't believe our eyes. And he said, we went out to see what had happened. And he said, it was so strange to see. He said, it was when you put your hands on him for a moment, all these readings went down to normal. And they said, for us as vets, it was really interesting as a scientist, to be able to look at it and see that it was actually having some physical effect. He said, we don't understand what you're doing and how you do it, but whatever you are doing, we can scientifically measure that something is actually happening. And that was really fascinating.
Wow. Are you still doing that for the vets?
I will do it if people ask me to. I haven't done it. It's quite difficult. Most vets, I mean, my own vet said to me once, if somebody wanted healing for an animal, I would recommend you to them, but they won't take that step of actually recommending that somebody goes to a healer. I think that's a step too far. And I can kind of understand that, because it probably just does all sound a little bit strange. And if they hadn't had that experience like those vets had of seeing it, you know, they probably think, just, as you say, it doesn't do any harm, but is it actually going to do any good? And I suppose from their professional point of view, they feel I can't risk my reputation sending somebody to somebody who does this when I don't really know whether it's going to work, which, you know, I guess that's fair enough.
Wow. I mean, that's just fascinating. Owen says, Viv, I adore the subtle to loud mention in the difference of healing and curing, following the flow of life as it is and will be, aiding when and if you can. That is beautiful. And then Sean says, that's fascinating. We get so much healing from animals, but it's amazing that it goes both ways. And then David says, I wonder if the dog on some deep level could sense that you were there to provide healing, perhaps.
Yes, maybe. I mean, I had noticed, obviously, his breathing had changed. That was something I could see, that his breathing sort of settling down and going, you know, much slower and going much back to normal. And he was getting quite sort of sleepy. You know, sometimes animals, well, even people, sometimes if you give them healing, will actually go to sleep. It's such a deep sort of relaxation response. Yeah.
And it's just lovely. There's a lovely response to our guests, our viewers here to this. The healing energy of a kind soul through touch with animals is a magical phenomenon, in my opinion. That's from Jules. And that's what you described. And then I can't remember who wants to know. Hannah, you have a wonderful confidence, Viv. Have you always been confident?
Not really. I mean, I did say to Eimear before we did this, because Eimear asked me when I went up to, I approached you, hadn't I? Because you'd done a talk with a friend of mine who I hadn't seen for some
Yeah,
time,
Esther
and
Harris.
reintroduced us. And then when we chatted, and then when you said to me, "Would you like to come on a fireside chat?" I was like, "Oh my God," I was just like really nervous, and it took me probably about 6 weeks or something to pluck up the courage to do it. So no, I wouldn't say I am confident. It's not an act. It's not a conscious act that I try to appear confident when I'm not. But I don't know, maybe that training somehow, again, that I had at the paper, perhaps it kicks in some way. And when I think once you get started, because, everybody's, like you said, everybody's lovely and very supportive. And so it's just a nice thing to do, really. I've just enjoyed, although I was very nervous before I came on, but now I've been doing it for a while. I do enjoy doing it. Isn't it just nice?
Beautiful. Pat says, touch is very important with sick hounds. I thought my old one was on the way out a few months back, but slept curled up around him for a few nights. And it wasn't healing like Viv's, but I think it eased him. Well, I think, Pat, I bet you were healing him.
Yes.
Because of the relationship you have with him. I think that would be really, really something to, to be held, like that, with love. I think,
Yes. And for the
there's a
animal,
magic.
if it's their person who they love, then I
Yeah, and
think
then
it is.
Pat, yeah.
Yes, it is a healing thing to receive. It's a comfort to them, isn't it? I mean, touch is a natural thing. If someone's distressed, we instinctively reach out to touch them, don't we?
That's right. Yes.
It's just a natural thing that you do.
Nimi says, my cat Django had a collapsed disc and had surgery and physio for months. He was still partially paralyzed. So we didn't take him again. A year later, I learned some energy healing and he can walk and jump up now. That is just brilliant. That's just wonderful. And Gina says, I agree with Sean. My last cat, Pippin, died in 24. Sorry about that. Had a way of snuggling and giving me hugs when my anxiety was especially bad. You see, and it's really interesting, the mutuality between humans and animals that, we touch animals and can offer them healing, and then the mutuality of that. And like I was mentioning to you earlier about my this experience with a horse a few years ago, that had cured my knee, and just 3 horses just nipping at me and one knowing exactly where to go. And I haven't had pain in that knee since. And I mean,
and I think animals are very sensitive to healing. I had quite a, I don't know, probably a few years ago, I had it where I keep my pony now, Badger. One of the other horses in the field came across to me and started swinging a quarters around. At first I thought she was going to kick me or something. I sort of moved out of the way, and she did it 2 or 3 times, and then the third time she did it and I'd moved out of the way, she turned around and looked at me as if to say, what's wrong? Why do you keep moving away? And I could tell by the expression of her body language, I thought, well, I don't think she is trying to kick me. I think she wants something. And so I just stood there, and she came up and she sort of pushed her quarters into my hands, because I'd been giving healing to my own pony and she'd been watching this. And I put my hands on her. And afterwards, well, I think it was probably about a week later, they said something in the school about, she does a pony that worked in the school, and they said, oh, we're a bit worried about this pony. She keeps, she bucked somebody off, I think, and she just doesn't seem comfortable about. We're thinking of having the vet to see her. And I said, well, funny you should say that, because the other day in the field, she came up and pushed herself into my hands. When they got the vet out, she'd obviously done something to herself in the field, and she put her pelvis out. And that was obviously where she wanted me. That's what she was doing, pushing that into my hands for me to put my hands on. Yeah.
Interesting. I mean, it's interesting, how animals communicate. I remember Howard and I with a group of, we ran a Druid college years ago. This is my late husband. And we were up at a sacred site, a stone circle in Kilkenny. And there were cattle there. And now I'm not afraid of cattle. So I was just watching the cattle. So the other people with me, a bit nervous. But this bullock kept coming up to us and just wouldn't leave us alone. And I noticed there was a big bramble attached to its tail. It kept coming back. And I said, you know what, Howard? He's asking us to take away from his tail. And we did. Yes. And it was like, and then he went off. And I saw a video of a diver who was approached by a shark.
Oh, yes. Okay.
And the shark had a huge hook.
Okay.
So the shark it just kept coming back, not attacking, until the diver realized, oh my God, look at the hook. I bet you the shark wants me to remove this. And the diver's a woman. She removed the hook.
Oh, okay.
And then that shark would come back to her every day. And then other sharks came who had similar
Oh, that's
things
wonderful.
removed.
Yeah.
She's never had an attack. That Ayanimi says she saw that too. And I was just blown away because sharks, they're scary
They have
things.
that reputation. Yes.
But that the word went round.
How
It's like
strange.
the other pony watching you and Badger going, I know what that's happening. If she can help him, maybe she can help me.
Yes.
And I just incredible,
I think that
So
animals are very sensitive to energy. I think they pick up on it. I mean, sometimes even if I'm giving healing to a person, if there's a cat or something in the house, the cat will come. I mean, some people might say, oh, that's just because they're curious and they want to know what you're doing. But they will sometimes come and even jump up on the person's knee because they want to be involved in it.
Yeah, it's and I've known people who've had, cat co-therapists or dog co-therapists, and obviously with the and it's long before animal assisted therapy. It's just people would have had a pet that was particularly sensitive and would come in, or a cat would jump up on the plinth and sit or put their paw on the area that needed the healing specifically. I mean, I find that just incredible.
They do. I mean, my lovely cat used to, if ever I was sad or anything, she would sit on my knee and she'd put her paw here on my heart and purr. And you could feel the vibration coming through. Yeah.
And that's the thing about purring, isn't it? I know cats purr to soothe themselves. Often people think, oh, they're happy, they're purring, and often no, they're in pain. And what they're trying to do is self-soothe.
And I think I read something about the frequency of a cat's purr is the same frequency as ultrasound. So if you've torn a muscle or something, you have ultrasound on it. If the cat put its paw on you and purred, that would be the same frequency, and you would get that healing from them.
Oh, yeah, I mean that just blows my mind. I just think it's absolutely incredible.
Amazing.
So beautiful. And again, you think of as druids, recognizing that we are nature, we're part of it. It's not just that we like it. That I think that's just fascinating. And here's an example of that interconnectedness and that ability of human and animal to communicate.
Yes.
Just to do that. And what a gift to receive healing for an animal and to be able to give healing. Pat says, if I'm sad, my cat ignores me until dinner time. If I'm happy, my cat ignores me until dinner time. So there are some cats that are just, have no interest, and others do,
Yeah. Well, I suppose it's like people, they've all got their different characters, haven't they?
Yes, and I had a dog, Willow. We had to rehome her for various reasons, but after my husband died. But if he and I were hugging, she would muscle in, put her two paws up and say, I want to join you.
Yes.
And always fascinates me because dogs don't do that to each other. They do not hug each other.
No.
But she would come and say, what about me? And just like our kids would do, can I join in? Like people do, two people, can I join in this hug? And she did exactly that. The paws would go up on so that she could have a hug too. And I thought, this is just fascinating. Just amazing.
Yes.
Just so beautiful. Jules says a service dog understands both physical and psychological chronic issues, and the dog can provide a relief that drugs can never match. Service animals know only kindness and understanding. It is just brilliant. Wow. And then Connor says, have you seen the Anna Breitenbach documentary, Animal Communicator? Absolutely fascinating. I don't know if you've come across her.
I haven't, no. I mean, I know animal communication is a bit of a subject, some people believe in it, some people don't believe in it. But my first horse that I had was a Connemara pony, And I always sort of say to people, I can remember walking onto the yard and sort of seeing her and thinking, oh, she was lovely. And I always say to people, it was not that I read Barbara Cartland novels, but I always say Barbara Cartland would have said something like, our eyes met and nothing else existed. It was just the most amazing thing, just looking at each other. And I can remember she did this lovely sort of soft wicker, which a horse will do usually when its person's there, you know, somebody they know well. And I can remember the lady, the yard manager, sort of looking at me and saying, oh, that's really strange that a horse would react like that when she doesn't know you. And I said, well, I know you're going to say this is really strange, but I kind of feel like we do know each other. It was almost like it was this feeling here. I don't know how to describe it really. Just like bolt of lightning or something hitting you. It was sort of like a friend that you hadn't seen for some time, I think. And as time went on, she did eventually end up coming to me because she got a little bit of arthritis and she couldn't work in school anymore. So she became mine. But I think before I'd learned to practice healing or anything like that, I think I'd been riding her for probably a couple of years, something like that. And I can remember waking up, I think it was a Sunday morning. I was going to be going riding in the afternoon. And it was, you know, when you're in that half asleep and half awake state, when you think, am I dreaming this or am I imagining it? And I just kind of saw this picture of her walking up, being led from the yard to, from the field to the yard. And she was limping on her right front foot. And I could just hear this word in my head, pain, pain. And I sort of woke up with a bit of a jolt. And I can remember saying to my mum at the time, oh, you know, I've had this dream. I feel a bit worried about Thistle. I'm wondering if she's all right. And my mum said, well, you know, if you're really worried, why don't you ring up? And part of me thought, I can't ring up and say this or think, who is this crazy woman who's, you know, communicating with a horse or whatever. And she said, anyway, you're going there this afternoon, so you'll find out. So I went there and I saw for some reason that I saw my name in the book and her name wasn't next to me. And I always used to ride her. So I said to Karen, oh, what's the matter with Thistle? Is she all right? And she said, no, she's had a kick in the field. So I was like, oh, okay. And I said, oh, is it a right front foot? And she looked a little bit surprised. She said, yes. How did you know that? And I said, well, I suppose I don't know if I dreamt it or whatever, but I saw her being led up from the field and she was limping and she went a bit pale and she said, what time was this? And I said, oh, about 8:30 in the morning. She said, oh, that's when I was bringing her in from the field. So obviously it was some sort of like, I suppose, a communication between us.
Wow. Were you able to heal her?
I don't think I actually did. I didn't practice healing then, so I didn't really kind of do anything. But yes, so I know some people poo-poo animal communication, but I know that it works. And another occasion, she had an accident once in the field when I was at work. And I just got this really strong feeling that she needed to come in. I couldn't see what it was, but I just thought she just needs to come into the field. So part of me thought, oh, you're just being ridiculous. But I thought, no, it was such a strong feeling. So I rang the school up and said, is this all right? I'm a bit worried about her. And they said, oh, she's fine. You know, we've only just come in from seeing the horses in the field. And I said, look, I know you're going to think I'm a crazy woman, but is there any way you could go back up to the field to have a look at her? Because I'm just really worried there's something wrong with her. And they ummed and ahed a bit, but they said, oh, you know, if you really think, we'll go back. So they went back, and in the 10 minutes after they'd come back to the school, another horse had a go at her and pushed her under this bar in the field and pushed her into this stream of really cold water and injured her leg. So they brought her in and she was limping quite a bit. And the vet said to me, because the vet used to tease me a little bit, he was a male vet, but he used to tease me a bit about this crazy stuff he used to say that you do. But he said to me, if you hadn't followed your intuition and she'd been left in that injured state in a freezing cold river for the day, we'd probably be looking at a very different outcome to the outcome that we're going to be looking at now. So it really taught me that if you feel something like that, if you have intuition, however much you tell yourself you're just being silly, you just really need to listen to it.
You do need to check it out. And Connor, yes, who was talking about that woman, Anna, it sounds very similar to what Anna detailed. Receiving images and words from the animals, Anna seemed to discover the practice in taking a course in tracking animals and unlock this communication. And interesting, there's a story near where I live in a village called Castlecomer, and there was a great estate there. And I think it was during the First World War. The son of the big house had gone off to war, and he had a horse, very, very mild-mannered horse. Very, they were very, very close. And one night he was in his stable, and he went absolutely berserk. He broke down the stable door. He was just out of it and couldn't understand. And then a few days later, they got word that his owner, his friend, had died in the war.
Oh, yeah.
And you think, wherever it was in Europe where his friend had been killed and his horse had picked this up. I mean, it's mind-blowing.
I mean, they talk, don't they, about this thing? I don't think it's called something like universal consciousness or something. And they say that telepathy is a way that we both kind of tune into some sort of universal field. I don't know, but that's the kind of possible explanation.
Absolutely. And Rupert Sheldrake has done studies on telepathy, and he's got people to ring people, and they have to guess the person who's receiving the call, and it won't have been set up. It's under proper conditions. And he also has written a book, How Owners' Dogs Know When They're Coming Home.
Oh yes, owners who know when dogs who know when their owners are coming home, or something like that.
Right.
Yes.
And so he varied it, because people said, no, you always come home at 5 o'clock. Of course, the dog is waiting at the gate. And they varied it at different times and various methods of coming home on a bus or a train or a car or whatever it is. And they found it didn't matter that, and the time of day, the dog dogs mostly would be there waiting. I just, and that's, he's researched that.
Not everybody I mean, the lady in the yard manager, I can remember she went quite sort of pale. She said, I don't want to hear any more of this. It's like witchcraft. I think it scared her almost a little bit. But to me, I said, well, why would you say that? I said, have you never done this, like you say, the phone rings and you've been thinking about somebody or something like that, and it's them. And to me, it's a lovely thing, because it's like you have that connection even when you're not physically together. It's not something to be frightened of.
No, I've had dreams of people. I had a dream was it last year? Yes, a friend. I dreamt that he had died and I'd missed his funeral, and in the dream I was very upset. He was 104. And I rang up a mutual friend and I said, is he okay? And he said, it's interesting that you rang me, that you texted me. He says, he's on the way to the hospital and I'm following the ambulance in the car. Okay. And he died a few weeks later, and I did his funeral. But it was that I did have a premonition, and it's if it scares you, I'm sorry, but sometimes it's like it's that. Actually, David says it kind of dissolves the boundaries we create around ourselves and our own consciousness. And Druidry really helps this process as a practice. It absolutely does, David. And I think it's such a gift to have that beautiful connection and not be frightened of it, because I think it's to be fearful of that is so sad.
Well, I suppose it's because people can't understand it, can they? And if they've never had anything like that themselves, I suppose to some people they think, well, it must be witchcraft or something. What else could be the explanation for it? They just can't get their heads around it. So I suppose maybe that's just what it. I suppose people fear what they don't understand.
Yes, that's true. Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just been such a joy talking to you, and I'm just some last few questions. Yeah. What are your concerns about the modern world?
Well, I suppose we all have, the big concerns, things like climate change, all this kind of thing. But apart from that, I suppose I think technology these days, things that are reported on the news and this sort of thing, and news reporting in general, I think it's quite scary these days because of these things like deep fakes and AI and all this sort of thing. You see these things and you really don't know whether it's true or not. And people say, oh, I've seen a film of so-and-so saying this and this, but you think, well, was the person actually saying that? Or have they just matched, this kind of thing? And it creates such distrust and division, I think, between people, and polarizes people so much. And, I think a lot of conflicts and things like that we see in the world today is because there's becoming this deep polarization between people's views, and I won't say people have been radicalized, not that term, but yeah, you just don't know what to believe, really, what's true. And just this creation of distrust, I suppose, it is something that's a worrying thing, I think. Technology can be a marvelous thing, can't it? But it can also be quite a dangerous thing, really.
Well, look at what we have here at this facility, and it's just wonderful. And that's the positive side. What gives you hope?
I think community is something that's very important. And in the village where we have the cottage, that is a wonderful example, really, of community.
Mm-hmm.
I can remember before we moved to the village, we have a shop in the village which is run completely by volunteers. And yes, really great little place. And they were telling us once about this gentleman in the village who he didn't drive anymore. He was quite an elderly gentleman. And like most villages, the rural bus services are not great. And his wife had to go into a nursing home in Trowbridge, which is about 5 miles away from the village. And he was really worried about how he was going to be able to get to see her, because his mobility wasn't that great, and getting to, from the home bus stop to the home, whatever. One of the people who ran the shop had heard him talking in the shop. And unbeknown to him, they spoke to quite a few other people, and they arranged this rota. And every day for 18 months, somebody, a different person, took him down from the village to see his wife. And they do a lot of things like that. During COVID, they set up all these street marshals. Every street had a marshal. So an older person knew they could ring that person up, and if they needed a prescription collecting, or if they needed some help or whatever, there's just such a wonderful sense of community in the village. And I think it's only a small thing, but if things like that could spread, I think if we have a sense of community, it alters our attitudes, doesn't it, to other people? I think changes our behavior towards other people. If we have that care and community, our reactions to other people will be different. And it's just a small start to maybe being able to live together on a more sort of tolerant level, and a caring for other people level.
That sounds so lovely, because it's so simple. We can't live on our own. Now, I'm in a rural area, so that wouldn't work for me, but I love the notion of being in a village where there's enough people around, and like you talk about street marshals, always somebody taking on that role. I think it's just incredible, just absolutely lovely, just beautiful. It's been such a joy talking to you.
Well, it's been lovely to talk to you too, Eimear.
And Nimi says, I'm loving this conversation. I have to say goodnight, really tired. It's been up since 5 a.m. spring cleaning our house. Oh my God.
Oh, you're
Bless
putting
you.
us to shame.
An interesting Pat says, different opinions or so last year. But these days, people have different facts. And I thought, oh my God.
Yes, that's very true.
It's funny, and it's not funny, because you're right. It's like, who's got the facts? And who fact checks the fact? I keep saying fact checkers. Fact checkers. So Moira says, lovely, really, really lovely to listen to you both. Such a warm discussion. Bright blessings to you both and everyone tonight. So I'm going to let you say goodnight to everybody, Viv.
Well, good night, everybody. And thank you all very much for your kind comments. They've been much appreciated. And it's been lovely to spend the last however long it's been, an hour or so with you all. So thank you for that.
So just Jules says, it's been a joy, Viv, to meet a kindred spirit. So
thank you.
And this is what's so lovely about these chats, is that I'm so blessed with having wonderful guests. So I will say goodnight to you. Just hang on. I'll send you to the green room, and we can just look at the comments after that, and I'll say goodbye here. So listen, thank you all for coming. Just loving your chats, or not your chats, your comments. Sorry. So thank you all for joining me, and I wish you a lovely evening, afternoon, morning, or if you're watching a recording of the session. So I think I'm going to be back in 2 weeks, because I'm now we're doing a storytelling circle on the what do you call it? Yes, I'll be back in 2 weeks with another Fireside Chat. So we're doing storytelling on the hearth. If anyone wants to join, any OBOD members want to join us on next Thursday at 8:00. So in the meantime, be well, and hopefully you're getting the weather you need. It's spring. Well, it's spring since the 1st of February, and now we're at 1st of March is on Saturday. It doesn't quite feel it, but we insist it's spring here. So listen, I look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks' time. And in the meantime, be well, and slán go fóill.